And now on to Paul Rosenblum of the Not Boring Boring Small Business Bookkeeping and Accounting podcast. And yes, I had to look because this is the longest podcast title on my own app. In this clip, Paul shares the unique reason why he initially started his podcast and the surprises that came, especially this unique connection that he'll talk about.
So, Paul, how has your podcast impacted your business?
Not in the way that most people think, because when I started the podcast, I was already a bookkeeper for 25 or 30 years. I was already teaching QuickBooks and bookkeeping and accounting for 30 years. So my expectation and my purpose for starting the podcast was not to build the business, which I would guess that that's what most people want to do with a podcast, is to help them market and build their business. I didn't want to do that. My purpose of going into a podcast at the very beginning was to disseminate the information that I have learned in the last 30 years through some very, very good people. Luckily, I met good people along the way, and I wanted to pay the universe forward.
That's so
And
sweet.
that was my original idea.
Right.
And after you and I started working together, May of 2023, you kind of opened my thinking into other things. Like it's not just disseminating the information, it's information that people are not getting elsewhere. They're not getting it in the education field. And I should be thinking about ways of making money or getting more clients or hiring bookkeepers who might be looking for freelance work. So over a period of time, I'm using the podcast to do other things. But one of the things that the podcast has really given me is it has validated my wealth of knowledge that I never really got a lot of validation. I mean, I always got good reviews and evaluations in every class that I ever taught. And I have always had clients who have liked me and continued relationships for 10 or 12 or 15 years.
Right.
But I've never really gotten the kind of validation as I get from people who write to me and give me reviews online. There's a couple of Apple reviews that every time I read them, I can't believe
That's
it.
so awesome.
This is part of Podcast to Connect. We're in the middle of a season right now where we're following April from Dorky Podcast through a series of kind of like mini coaching sessions where we're working through her audience growth. The entire season is focused on audience growth for her history podcast. It's an entire season. We're at episode 2. It'll go to episode 8 by the end of the year. So please do join us for that.
Can we dig into the emails? I mean, not specifics on the emails that people sent you because those are private, but the types of emails that you get, because I've never seen a podcast or a podcast host get so many long, passionate emails about a topic before. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, there are really a couple of groups of people. Bookkeepers are one of the groups that send me email thanking me for the podcast. Because they listen to other podcasts and they find them either too long or too hard to understand, or they're selling something every 2 minutes, or too boring, or whatever. And I get email on a regular basis now from bookkeepers who are saying, I look forward to your next episode because you explain things in such an easy way that even I can understand it, is really what their point is. So that's one group of people. I just got an email saying that they listen to other podcasts, but they listen to my podcast when they do treadmill in the morning, which I thought was great.
Awesome.
I love that. So I'm in someone's ears when they're running on the treadmill. And then that's one group. And then the other group seems to be a couple of educators, people who are teaching bookkeeping, who told me in email that they are using several of my episodes for either class conversations or homework assignments. And that's what kind of got me thinking to it would be great to get back into education,
Mhm.
but in a unique way. I don't want to take a day out of the office and teach in front of people.
Right.
But if I can do this through the podcast, then that
Mhm.
would actually help expand the business, going back to the original question.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's great hearing from people who listen to the podcast. I have one email I got last December, and I started reading the email, and she said, "I'm traveling home. I live in Canada.
Mhm.
I'm traveling home. I'm sitting in an airport, and I just found your podcast and listened to 5 or 6 episodes, and
Yeah.
I'm a bookkeeper,
Mhm.
and I love the way you explain things and all this validation. It was great." And to make a
Mhm.
long story short, we email almost every day.
Mhm.
And she just got married to someone who she's been with for about 10 or 12 years. So
Yeah.
she's off the market. Unfortunately, I'm very jealous. Um, but we talk bookkeeping all the time, and I
Yeah.
bounce ideas off of her. She bounces ideas off of me. They were in the car once, about 2 months ago, going up to into their
Yeah.
another place that they own, I guess. And they were listening to podcast
Mhm.
episodes and texting me. I was at the pool. She
I
was
remember
texting me at
that.
the
Yeah.
same time. That absolutely blew my mind.
I love that when you shared that they were listening to episode after episode on a road trip, and I'm like, that's
Yep.
like a podcasting dream to have somebody that engaged with what you're doing.
Yeah, I just thought that was so, and that's that's one of the things that the podcast has
Mhm.
really done for me. It validates what I've done for the last 30
Mhm.
years. And it's stroking
That's
my
huge.
ego every day. It's really, and I need that. So
That's huge.